Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Neighbors were constantly loud, so I got a bit louder at the wrong time of the year. Throughout the year I had noisy and thoughtless neighbor. They would often have loud parties that would go to the early hours of the morning. And they were all in university and of Indian descent. This becomes important later on. I had called the police, called the apartment manager. Nobody would do anything about it. I was losing sleep and my work was becoming affected as well. I had spoken to them directly and they completely disregarded me and refused to just shut the heck up. This went on for months and I was riding out my lease to move somewhere else. One day I'm sitting watching TV on a nice spring day and I have my windows wide open. And I hear one of the neighbor's friends come over and he asks if he's coming out. And he says no. He needs to study for an important test he's taking the next day. This little snippet of information was all I needed. His friend leaves and he closes the door. I then proceeded to take my speakers and put them up against the walls, near where I knew his desk was. There were balconies outside, so I often saw him studying there. And I began to blare Merzbow and death metal straight at the wall. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and just blasted it as loud as possible for hours. My landlord actually ended up coming into my apartment because I didn't hear him knocking, and he's obviously flipping out. But I'm like, meh, you never did anything when I complained, so good luck. Call the cops. My lease was set to be up soon anyway, and I was leaving the state. So screw y'all. So the landlord leaves, and I'm still amped up on adrenaline. It's quiet for maybe 20 minutes. And I just intermittently start blasting music. The neighbor comes over irate, screaming that he has this big test and that he's got to pass it. Apparently a medical student. And I just laughed in his face and said, I don't hear anything. He then makes a fantastic mistake, which was telling me he didn't just have a final tomorrow, but it was finals week. Oh, great. Added stress for the week equals the fact that I continued doing this every night for the rest of the week. I set my alarm to go off every 30 minutes and I would bang on the walls with a hammer and blast music on top of it. And I was going a bit crazy as well, but that didn't matter because I was screwing up this guy's life. Around day 3 of no sleep for anyone, he comes over screaming about how in India his family will disown him and all this nonsense, which just made me laugh and just said the same thing over and over, that I didn't hear the music and I think it was coming from somewhere else. I basically just started gaslighting him, acting really nice when he came over in a rage. That weekend the landlord gave me some nonsense notice that I have to leave, which I was fine with because he broke my lease and I wanted to get out anyway, so I got my deposit back. On the last morning I was there, I was moving out, and I knocked on the jerk neighbor's door at like 8 AM, and I asked him if he wanted this old air conditioner that I was going to throw out otherwise. He was totally in a daze, and I don't know if he really understood what was happening any longer. Anyway, hopefully I screwed up his life. Should have shut the heck up when I told him numerous times. Next story. You steal my identity, I steal your cars. I just recently found some of the revenge subs around here. I spent a chunk of my weekend reading the amazing posts. Last night my husband and I were visiting with our neighbor on our patio and I told him about one of the posts. Our neighbor then shared one of his revenge stories and gave me permission to retell it here. Names have been changed to protect the guilty. Our 40-something neighbor Frank Smith has a brother 3 years older named Fred, with the two similar in looks and build. Apparently, these boys were not obedient children and got into trouble a lot. Frank mostly straightened up by the time he reached 21, but Fred kept at it, with drinking, drugs, multiple DUIs, and so on. While the two were still living at home with their parents in their early 20s, Frank happened to leave his wallet on the kitchen counter one night after coming home from a night out. The next morning, he discovered his ID wasn't in his wallet. Thinking he must have left it at a bar the night before, he tried locating it but with no luck. Not thinking much about it, he just got a new ID. Fast forward a year or so and Frank gets a phone call. It is his uncle whose son works at the county jail. Fred had been arrested, and their cousin happened to see him when he was getting booked. And it was under the name Frank Smith. Turns out, Fred had given the police Frank's name and ID, and was going to jail under Frank's identity. Needless to say, Frank was angry. He went down to the jail to prove he was Frank and that Fred was a liar. Fred was ultimately sentenced to serve time and stayed put. During this time that Fred was in jail, Frank received a letter in the mail from the state PMV. It said that his two vehicles, an Audi sedan and a Volkswagen Bug, were due for e-checks, emission checks. Frank was confused because he only owned a truck. He went to the PMV and discovered that these two vehicles were indeed titled in his name. And that's when Frank realized that his brother, who had lost the right to own a vehicle due to excessive DUIs, used his identity to register these cars. The revenge. Frank asked how much it cost to get duplicates of the titles. $8 each. So he paid $16 and walked away with title documents for the two cars. He knew enough of his brother's friends to start calling around in search of the cars. Lo and behold, he located them both at different locations. Frank is a knowledgeable mechanic and could start these cars without keys. But he knocked on the door of each house where the cars were. He explained to each person that he owned the title to this car, showing them the document, and gave them the opportunity to remove their belongings from the vehicle before he took it. They understood and didn't push back, taking their things back out of the car and handing him the keys. Frank proceeded to sell both cars, pocket around $3,000 for all his troubles. The good news is that after his stint in jail, Fred got sober and became someone Frank could actually be friends with. Next story. Want me to get fired? Own a reverse card. This happened over a year ago when I was working as a waiter in a restaurant. First of all, I need to put on some context. The ruling of the store, and let's name her Diane. When I started to work there, they explained to me my benefits. One of them was staff food. Free staff food every day. And then every Tuesday and Thursday, we could order some items on the menu with a 50% discount if we wanted to have something nice to eat, or just choose to go with the free staff meal. To do so in the system, we would open a table in our name, the table Michael for example, order what we want, and the managers would close the table with a 50% discount and keep the due money from the tips. Fair enough. Keep this in your mind for later. Now let's introduce you to Diane. Diane was a veteran waitress working there 4 to 5 years in a store when I started. She knew everything very well and was honestly good at her job. She befriended the managers, and she was appreciated by the owner. On my first days, Diane looked nice to me, always smiling and friendly. And I think over the years I realized that Diane was a two-faced girl. She would be very friendly to you and complain about you behind your back. We had a Facebook group where all the waiters and managers were added, and she would very often complain about the job not being done correctly. She was mostly working morning shifts, so she would mostly work alone, serve the few tables she had in the daytime, and wait for the night shift to change her. On weekends, she would not be alone, so some of us would also be mornings. And here is her beautiful portrait. She would try to be very bossy with her co-workers, including me. She would devalue the work of everyone else, so she would make it look like she was the only one working hard. She would message the managers about her co-workers and why one or the other should be fired. She would ask the managers to reprimand us if we were late 5 minutes. She herself sometimes would come 45 minutes late for work. Managers would come on opening time and see if everything was done correctly, forcing us to open without her on the weekends. She would befriend the managers but talk badly about them to us, telling us that they had no idea how to run the store. A lovely person. Everyone in the store, manager and owner excluded, wanted her out of the team. She was hated then, a nightmare to work with. They literally gave her only morning shifts to avoid people working with her and create problems. After 2 years in the store, I knew the job very well and was not considered a beginner anymore by anybody. I knew everything I had to do and was good at my job as well. I could literally run the store alone, outside of the management work of course. One day she tried to boss me around by giving me orders which I ignored, because I knew where my priorities had to be. She didn't like that at all, and I loved it. The more she would ask me to do something, the more I'd do everything but that. At the end of the shift, she went to speak with the manager about me, then to my co-worker, let's call him Tony, who then came to repeat to me what she said. She told him that she would try to do everything in her power to get me fired. To which I replied very pissed, "Alright, so let's talk about the fact that you've been paying for her food for at least 2 years now." Tony was very confused by what I just told him and asked me what I meant by that. See, from when I started and over the past 2 years, I saw regularly Diane finishing her shifts and bringing home takeaway orders that everyone assumed was her discounted staff food. The thing is, I noticed that the ticket from her food left in the kitchen didn't have her name on it, but a table number that was closed as cash payment in the system. The thing is, if the table is marked as paid, but the money is missing from the till, managers would take the missing money from the shared tips to pay what is due. So ultimately, we would all pay for the food that she ordered. Back then I remember asking her about it and she replied something like, "Don't worry about it, managers know it's okay." I didn't believe her, but being the new guy I didn't want to create any trouble. I just let it be. And for over 2 years she just ordered and ordered. I don't really know why I didn't say something, but guess it just became a habit to see her leaving with takeaways and not being a troublemaker. I kept my mouth shut. Plus she was friends with the managers, which was intimidating enough. Tony was stunned that I never said anything about this, since absolutely everyone was waiting for anything to get her fired. I apologized and I told him to just observe her and look carefully at what she was bringing home. And guess what? The very next day Tony caught her. He checked what she was bringing home, checked in the system, and confronted her. She started stuttering and panicking, trying to quickly get out of this situation, and then she just headed home. Tony then told the managers what happened, who confronted her by text messages. She tried to play it as a misclick, then said that she would pay it, but nothing could trick the manager at this point. She lasted until the end of the week and then got removed from the team. We shared her tips and rejoiced over our defeated enemy in the Facebook group. I even took a warning for offering shots to everybody, celebrating her firing. It was worth it, and I would do it again. Next story. Punched in the chest at Walmart. I read it. This is normally a subreddit that I do not frequent, but lucky me, I have a story. A bit of info before going in that'll make sense later. I'm a severe asthmatic, and recently I had to begin treatment to clear my airways of gunk. Currently taking medication to help, but it is causing a lot of chest pain on the side and causing a cough. I left home to go to work early in an attempt to see my girlfriend, but found myself out of my work drinks, so a Walmart trip was needed. I got ready and into my work uniform. A light blue shirt with my work logo and job title stitched to the upper left in clear white letters. Pants and black shoes. I also had on a dark green sweat jacket because of the cold. I got to Walmart roughly 10 o'clock, put my mask on and hurried in to get in and out. I hurried to the drink aisle and start looking for cherry soda. A lady comes up from behind me and grabs my arm and starts to pull.
I have been looking for one of you jerks for 20 minutes. Now take me to the aisle where I can find the electronics item X.
I, a bit taken aback, slide my arm out of her hand and politely inform her that I do not work at Walmart. She did not like that and started yelling about me being disrespectful and how I am dressed like I'm an employee. I started paying little attention to her and found my drink. I start walking away, but this lady grabs me again and starts yelling louder.
You little jerk! Pay attention to me or you're going to hell. You better help me or I will go to your manager.
I roll my eyes and say, "Ma'am, as I said before, I do not work here. Please leave me alone. I'm in a hurry." And she did not like this. She yells,
Liar!
I point at the word stitched on my shirt. She then lets me go and I think that's it. I say, I would help you find one, but I'm in a hurry. I try to leave again, but she gets in front of me and she says something that I don't recall, because next thing I know, she punched my chest hard. Struggling to breathe already, I black out and drop the original drink. I come to in front of the store and the lady and the store manager were arguing, with the police already called. The manager noticed I was moving and said, "Son, can you stay? The police are on the way. Are you okay?" I struggled to answer and just tried to catch my breath. I just look at the manager. The police come around that time. I'm able to talk a bit, but get winded just talking. The manager shows the camera footage to the police and I'm asked if I wanted to press charges alongside the manager. I say, maybe later. I just want to get some rest now. The manager gets an employee to help me get my items. I see the bottle I made, and I then get my items, pay and leave the store. Sadly, it was 10 minutes before my shift, so I had to go straight to work. Update. I called at Walmart and spoke to the manager, who gave me the officer contact information, and I then contacted that officer and pressed charges. Explanation why I didn't at the time this happened: I couldn't breathe well. I also wanted to take the medication to get me stable as quickly as I could. I agree with y'all. I should have pressed charges immediately. And also yes, I'm drinking the cherry soda because cherry cough syrup doesn't taste good, nor does it taste like cherry. Next story. How dare you expect me to follow the same rules as everyone else? Years ago, I worked in a convenience store, which happened to be located immediately next to a school. Every afternoon on school days, we would be inundated with school-aged children on their way home. Some came in on their own, others with their parents. In order to control shoplifting tendencies, our store had a policy that all school bags must be left outside the front door. No exceptions. This is nothing unheard of in this area we live in. I've seen several other stores that have the same policy, and kids just automatically know to do it. In most circumstances, it's the parents who have an issue with it. Parents seem to be under the impression that their child should be exempt from the policy. I can honestly understand the logic. The parents believe they are able to police their own child's behavior in their presence, so the shoplifting is no longer an issue. Unfortunately, this doesn't account for the 50 or so other kids who see kids in the store with their bags and think they can bring theirs in too. Therefore, the policy is applied equally to all, whether the parents believe it to be fair or not. One afternoon towards the end of the school rush, a father followed by two young, maybe 10 and 8-year-old girls, entered the shop. I call out my usual old-school bags need to be left outside, please girls. From behind the counter, as I'm serving two other school kids, and the girls immediately head back out the door to drop off their bags. But the dad also immediately calls after them. "It's okay girls, just come in." The girls hesitated in the doorway looking at me. I again raised my voice over the noise in the shop and informed him of the policy. He replied that his kids were with him, and they were allowed to keep their bags with them. Still serving other customers, I say, "I'm sorry, sir, but they cannot bring their bags into the store. The policy applies to every child with a school bag. If you don't want them to leave their bags outside, they will need to wait outside while you make your purchases." Whole front wall of the shop was windows. He never would have been out of visual contact with them. And this absolutely set him off. He started yelling and cursing at me, throwing things around the shop and just being a threat to anyone and everyone else in the shop. Luckily, it was starting to quiet down, but we still had over 20 people in the small shop at that time. I told him to leave and warned him that if he continued, I would call the police, which is exactly what I had to do. He continued his tantrum for another 10 minutes or so before he stormed out of the door. As the shop was smashed all over the floor by this point, the cops showed up about 20 minutes after he left, and they took my statement, copied the surveillance footage, and last I heard, they identified him and are going to pay him a visit. I mostly felt sorry for his kids. They just stood there looking terrified the whole time it was happening. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.